Hey everybody, it's ShadowStar here for my episode ranking of Series 11 of Modern Doctor Who. So, Series 11 is where the controversy really starts to begin, and honestly, I enjoyed the series a bit more on my rewatch. That being said, it's still a bit more of a weaker season, especially after the heavy-hitting episodes of the 12th Doctor. But it's still a brand new season, and there's still some good points, and there's still some very boring and weak points, and some of it's just a mess. But hey, it's not nearly as controversial as Series 12. Anyway, let's get on with the 10th position, the weakest episode of the entire season, the Saranga Conundrum. What the hell even happened in this episode? Okay, the Pating was here tearing the ship apart, but there was other stuff in this episode, and there were characters in this episode, and it's name a character in this episode who isn't a regular character. I bet you can't. I can't, and I watched the episode. What even happened in this episode? I'll give you credit, at least the Pating's cute, and it's a cool design, but otherwise, it's this episode just felt like nothing was happening, then something was happening. It's one of those episodes where even when I'm trying to care, I just can't care. Oh god. This is a really bad version of a classic story, where things are just all over the place and the Doctor's having to explain every little thing, and because all the sets look the same, you can't tell what's going on, and what even happened in this episode? Alright, 9th position. It Takes You Away. What the hell was this episode? Why was there a frog? I have no idea. We're suddenly in a pocket dimension, and again, this feels like I've said, Chibnall sometimes really feels like he wants to write for Classic Who, because it really feels like we're in Classic Who where things are going nowhere, then suddenly there's this complete random entity from another universe, and yeah, and there is no villain of this episode. I mean, I suppose the thing is kind of villainous in a misunderstood way, because it just wants you to stay with it, and if you don't like it, it throws you out of the universe. And then all the side characters are a pain, and by all the side characters, I mean two. Both the daughter and the father are a pain, because the father's a complete abusive, neglectful idiot, and the daughter's just annoying. So yeah, who needs either of them to have a happy ending? The only redeeming quality about this episode is Graham. Graham at least gets to have a bit more of a conclusion in this episode when the thing takes on the form of Grace. So that at least is a good scene in an otherwise really boring or annoying story. So I'll give you that. Speaking of what hell is an episode, Episode 8, The Battle of Rangskor Av Kolos. Good luck even remembering the name of this episode. Stop having names of things. They're just too confusing. Anyway, this is the finale? You call that a finale? I mean, don't get me wrong, I have issues with episodes like Hellbent, but at least it looks like a finale. What the hell was this? Most people will agree that this doesn't feel like a finale. What does feel like a finale is the New Year's special that comes right after it, and even when it aired only a few weeks later, so it really felt more like a finale. But this episode itself, it's not bad. It does get some good confrontation scenes between Tim Shaw and the Doctor, as well as confrontation scenes between Graham and Tim Shaw. Even though it was short-lived, that was a nice scene. And the moment where Graham says he wants to kill Tim Shaw and the Doctor has to talk him out of it, that was a really good scene, the way he was dead serious about it. So those were at least good scenes in an otherwise really boring episode. And again, the side cast were really not exciting at all. None of the side casts were exciting other than Tim Shaw. And yeah, this was not a finale. I mean, it kind of was. We kind of wrapped things up with Tim Shaw and the little arcs with Graham, so I kind of get it, but compared to pretty much every other modern Doctor Who finale, there's no craziness in this episode whatsoever. Alright, Episode 7, Arachnids in the UK. I used to like this one a bit more, but my opinion's gone down. Whatever happened to Never Cruel or Cowardly, Doctor? I think letting creatures starve or suffocate to death is considered very cruel and cowardly. That's a very slow death. I mean, I know Jack Robinson's a dick, but he is kind of right that killing them would be the better option. if you've got nowhere else to take them, if you can't take them to another planet, then putting them out of their misery is the only thing you can do. You can't let them roam free, as you said, and I guess you can't take them to the TARDIS. Well, you can't because the TARDIS is too far away. So, yeah, I guess putting them out of their misery is the best option. I know some people have issue with the Jack Robertson character, and I can see why, but I like that he kind of is used for comic relief. So yeah, but mainly because the Doctor isn't the Doctor in this episode is why this episode isn't ranked as high. And that happens a lot in these episodes where the Doctor's kind of being the opposite of himself. Speaking of which, it's kablam. So, when I first watched this episode, way back in the day being 2018, I actually liked it. And I don't hate it now, but people have started to turn on the episode, and rewatching it, I can see why. Before I rewatched it, I was like, oh, really? Why do people hate this episode? When I rewatched it, it was like, you know what? I kind of get it. Because, like, at first I thought, okay, it's trying to take a balanced approach and say that, okay, the guy is going too far, but he's still got a point. And that is true. But the Doctor doesn't really seem to be that upset by the system. She seems to be more upset by how people are misusing the system. But even before she discovers something's going wrong, she makes comments like, oh, why are you getting workers when you could be getting robots? It's like the whole episode is to point out how we can't have robots to do everything. Which I kind of do like that, because it kind of takes on something you've always seen in sci-fi. In a lot of sci-fi shows, you always see robots or machines doing everything for people in the future, and it looks great. And this kind of says, well, in the future people still need jobs. We've not evolved beyond the point of the need for jobs, so therefore we can't have robots doing everything for everyone. So yeah, I kind of do like that subversion, but it's except the fact that the Doctor isn't holding the morals of what should be the moral point of the story. The moral of the story is to upend having automation take over literally everything, and yet the Doctor doesn't seem to be against it that much, even in the end. Aside from those points, it's still a fun story. All the characters are actually enjoyable, even the ones who are villainous. Graham, and I should point out this, any episode that's got Graham, which is all of them, has plenty of good one-liners, but yeah, it's those that, once again, the Doctor's not being the Doctor. Now, speaking of episodes that are actually somewhat enjoyable, it's the Ghost Monument. This is quite a fun episode for a second adventure, and it's before we started to realise where this season was going too, so I still remember the first time I watched it quite enjoying it because, it's a second adventure, we're still all hyped for a new Doctor, a new team, a new everything, a new TARDIS, which was... I'm not that fond of this TARDIS set, to be honest, but it's still an exciting scene when we first see the new TARDIS, and all the characters have good moments in this episode. The characters have good moments, and even the characters who are dicks have good moments too. That's the thing. This is an episode where all the side characters are enjoyable. Not amazing, but at least enjoyable and fun to be around, even the ones that are quite dicks at times. So you know what, I enjoy this. Also, it's the first episode with a mention of the Timeless Child, but we'll worry about that in Series 12. Anyway, I didn't mind this episode. It was quite enjoyable. The Doctor was great in it. The companions were all great for their first little adventure. There's lots of good one-liners and moments throughout this episode, so it's a good first adventure. Being a first adventure always has an advantage. Now we're getting to ones I actually enjoy. It's The Witchfinders. I enjoy this episode. For one thing, we get to shit on religion. I know we're mostly shitting on the extreme, old-timey religion that takes things way too far, but it's still fun. The Doctor's greatness, the moment where the Doctor is, like, tied up and accused of being witched and is having a conversation with, King... Oh god, I forgot which king it was. Anyway, when she's having a conversation with him, that was a great confrontation scene. We have actual villains in this episode, not just human villains, actual villains. There's a distinct lack of alien villains in this season, other than Tim Shaw. But hey, look, alien villains. And all the characters are good too, even the ones that are batshit insane like the King. And speaking of which, he's just an enjoyable character. He's insane, but I love how over-the-top and campy he is, and that kind of makes it fun. But yeah, all the characters have good moments in this episode too. So you know what? I actually enjoyed this episode. There are a lot of good stuff in it. Alright, third place, Woman Who Fell to Earth. I remember the first time I watched this feeling such excitement because, it was the first time I'd seen a new Doctor as it was airing. Obviously, I'd seen new Doctors, but I came in when 12 was still current, so this was fun just getting to that excitement of getting a new Doctor and all that stuff. First off, Jodie Whittaker looks way better in Peter Capaldi's suit. It feels like such a different feeling. New Doctors always do, but the show itself was such a different feeling from everything we just have. Watching this right after the last few 12th Doctor episodes is such a mood whiplash. Not in a bad way, it's just crazy the switch we've got, but I suppose that was the case with Series 5 as well. But there's lots of good moments in this episode, and you really felt like you were getting to know the Doctor. It really felt like, yes, this is the Doctor, we're showing you this is Doctor, we're showing you the new companions, they're all great characters. The death of Grace was a shocking moment too, because you didn't expect it was to come, and even beyond that, you don't realise if you didn't know who was going to be the companions, you weren't sure who was going to stay and who wasn't, so all throughout this episode, it was a great episode, to be honest. The music is good, not in a crazy Murray Gold way, but in a more subtle way. It's a very earthbound story, and I like it. It was a great story for a new Doctor. Alright, it's the final two, and then we're getting into the heavy hitters. This was tough, but I'm putting in second place Rosa. This one's still really good. The historical episodes are great. The whole premise is great. I love the fact that while sure we do with a villain, it's less about just flat out defeating the villain to stop their plan, and more fixing history and putting it back in place. It feels like something you'd have happen in season 2 and 3 of Legends of Tomorrow, where it's less about stopping a villain and more just we've got to put history back in place, even if it's not perfect. And that is great. I love how we have to kind of put the puzzle back into place, and I know we've had adversity in historical episodes in the past, but this episode obviously really shows the adversity you'll face in the past. So yeah, I really like that this episode puts a huge spotlight on those issues of the past, and obviously that climactic scene with Rosa is really great. The acting is really great. That moment with Graham when you realise he's the person who stood up so that she had to be told to stand up is just great. The expression on his face is perfect. I know some people criticize the use of a song at the end, but obviously that song does have meaning towards the message of the episode. So it's not just, a pop music episode. No, it's more than that, and people need to understand that. I know I've often been critical of certain issues around this issue, but there's no denying I really love the way this episode handled it, and that's great. There are good ways to handle this type of issue and bad ways, and this episode handled it spectacularly. This was exactly what I want from historical episodes. But I think I have to give first place to a slightly better historical, Demons of the Punjab. Both this and Rosa are good for similar reasons. This one, however, there is no alien villain. The villain is the humans in the past. The villain is not someone we can stop, because the villain is just history in itself. This episode, first off, I love when we tie something to an air date beyond just Christmas. You don't think about it on a rewatch, but this episode aired, I believe, directly or one day before Remembrance Day, which, it ties in with the whole theme of war, people dying unnoticed. There's even images of fields of poppies, so it has that whole Remembrance Day feel. The music in this episode is incredible. I love how they really tie in the music with the whole Hindu and Muslim feel to it. I really love that aspect of this episode. All the characters are really good in this episode. There's lots of good small moments with the characters, but lots of good, great moments too. There's so many good lines. Graham's got good lines. We really immerse ourselves in the history and get to know the characters, and I love it. It's an episode that, sure, there is aliens, but this whole episode is just history. you could have almost done this episode without the aliens, although the aliens tie in well with the theme as well, but it's just a perfect episode where we really immerse ourselves in the history. And that's what I really enjoyed. It's like, oh man, I really loved this episode when I was watching it. And there's lots of good moments in it. And of course, whenever you have aliens, you've always got to have that subversion of, oh, we think they're the villains, but we're not. So yeah, I enjoyed the historicals of this episode, this season. I think we can all agree, Chibnall, stick to the historicals and not to the sci-fi and the crazy plot twists. We'll get into that in Series 12. But yeah, Series 11, weaker than a lot of the other seasons. And the episodes I like them for a lot different reasons than I would usually like them. Like, the reasons I'm praising episodes this season is far different than the reasons I usually praise certain other episodes. Some episodes, the problem with Series 11 is when an episode is bad, it's not bad because it pisses me off, it's just boring, like the Sendangra Conundrum or It Takes You Away. Also, some of these episode names are just silly. Anyway, next season is Series 12, the one with all of the controversy, and boy do I have a lot of stuff to talk about in Series 12, but we'll worry about that next time. Anyway, I will see you next time for more Doctor Who reviews and other things as well. See you next time, guys.